In the quiet outskirts of Riverside Valley, Jack Reynolds kept his family-run auto repair shop alive through sheer determination. Despite facing foreclosure and drowning in medical bills from his own son's past treatments, he spent an entire night fixing a stranded single mother's broken-down SUV without charging a penny. What Jack never imagined was that this simple act of compassion would lead to an unexpected visit from one of Silicon Valley's most enigmatic billionaires, setting off a chain of events that would transform not just his life, but an entire community's future. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Another shut-off notice, Jack muttered, running his calloused hands through his graying hair. The morning light filtered through the grimy windows of Reynolds' auto service, casting long shadows across the worn concrete floor. The small office fan hummed weakly, barely stirring the stack of unpaid bills scattered across his desk. 25 years of serving Riverside Valley, and he'd never seen times this tough. The ancient wall clock ticked past 7 as Jack pulled up the heavy garage door. His son's medical bills from 3 years ago still haunted his credit score, but he kept that pain hidden behind a weathered smile. The familiar scent of motor oil and metal greeted him as he began arranging his tools, a morning ritual unchanged since his father first taught him the trade. Maria, his only remaining employee, arrived right on time, her dark circles matching his own. "Boss, the bank called again about the loan payment," she said softly, hanging up her jacket. "And Peterson's Auto across town is offering discounts to all our regular customers." Jack nodded, his shoulders heavy. 3 mechanics had already left for better-paying jobs in the city. He couldn't blame them. He'd missed payroll twice last month. The industrial park's closure had hit their community hard, sending most of his loyal customers searching for work elsewhere. The morning crawled by with only 2 oil changes and a brake inspection. Jack kept glancing at the framed photo on his desk, him and his son Tommy at the garage's 20th anniversary celebration, before the accident that drained their savings and changed everything. The picture sat next to his father's old diagnostic manual, its pages yellow with age and wisdom. Around noon, the distinct sound of a failing transmission broke the quiet. A dark blue minivan limped into his lot, smoke wisping from under the hood. The driver, a woman in scrubs, climbed out looking close to tears. 2 young girls peered anxiously from the back seat, their backpacks still on. "I heard it making noise on my way to drop them at school," the woman explained, her voice trembling. "I'm Rachel Martinez. I just started my nursing shift rotation at Valley General, and I can't lose this job. I've only been in town 3 weeks." Jack popped the hood, immediately spotting the severity of the damage. The transmission was shot, and several other critical components showed dangerous wear. Rachel stood beside him, clutching her phone and hospital ID badge as he explained the extensive repairs needed. How much?" she asked, her face paling. "Parts and labor. Around $2,800, Jack said quietly, knowing from her expression it might as well have been $1 million. Rachel's composure cracked. "I just spent everything moving here after their father." She stopped, wiping her eyes. "We lived in my car for 2 weeks before finding a place. I start my new job tomorrow, and the girls finally got into a good school, and now—" Her eldest daughter reached for her hand through the open window. Something in Jack's chest tightened. He saw himself in her eyes, that same desperate look he'd had when trying to find money for Tommy's treatments. The memory of sleeping in hospital chairs, counting coins for cafeteria coffee, wondering if he'd lose everything. "Listen," Jack heard himself saying. "Leave it here. I'll see what I can do." "I can't pay that much," Rachel started, but Jack held up his hand. "We'll figure something out. You need to get to work, and the girls need to get to school." He pulled out his own keys. "Take my truck for now. It's the blue one there. Good on gas, runs fine. Bring it back when your shift ends." Rachel stared at him, keys in her trembling hand. "But why would you?" "Because someone once helped me when I thought all hope was gone," Jack said, memories of those dark hospital days flooding back. "Sometimes, we all need a little faith." As Rachel drove off in his truck, Maria watched from the office window. In 15 years of working for Jack, she'd seen his kindness cost him dearly, But she also knew about Tommy, about the anonymous donor who'd helped with the final hospital bill, about the promise Jack had made in that sterile hospital room 3 years ago. What neither of them knew was that Rachel's arrival would set in motion events that would reach far beyond their small garage. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the largest ripples, and someone very powerful was about to notice. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the empty service bays as Jack began working on Rachel's minivan. Each diagnosis revealed more problems. The transmission was worse than he initially thought, the brake lines were dangerously worn, and the cooling system needed a complete overhaul. The repairs would cost him nearly all his remaining parts inventory, but something about Rachel's situation had struck a deep chord. The wall-mounted radio crackled with local news as he worked, another business closing downtown, more families leaving for bigger cities. Riverside Valley was slowly fading, like so many small towns before it. Jack remembered when the streets buzzed with life, when 3 generations of families brought their vehicles to Reynolds's auto service, trusting the name his father had built. Now, the check engine light on his own business was flashing red. Maria appeared in the doorway, holding a fresh cup of coffee and wearing a concerned expression she couldn't quite hide. "Your son Tommy called," she said softly. "He wants to know if you're coming to his physical therapy session tomorrow." Jack nodded without looking up from the engine, his hands steady despite the weight of worry pressing down on him. Between the garage's bills and Tommy's ongoing recovery, something would have to give. He just prayed it wouldn't be both. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Jack worked late into the night on Rachel's minivan, the fluorescent lights of his garage casting harsh shadows across the empty service bays. Old invoices and parts catalogs littered his makeshift workbench, each one a reminder of just how close Reynolds's auto service was to becoming another for-lease sign in Riverside Valley's fading landscape. "You're doing it again, boss," Maria said, setting down a cup of gas station coffee beside him. She should have gone home hours ago, but she'd stayed, quietly handling paperwork and keeping him company. "Same look you had when Tommy was in the hospital." Jack straightened up from the engine, his back protesting after hours of work. The diagnostic computer screen blinked with multiple warning indicators. The minivan's problems went deeper than he'd first thought. "Can't help it," he admitted, reaching for the coffee, "when I saw those girls in the back seat." Maria nodded, understanding in her eyes. She'd been there through everything: Tommy's accident, the endless hospital stays, the day Jack had to let go of half his staff. Now, she watched him pour his dwindling resources into a stranger's vehicle, knowing better than to try talking him out of it. The wind picked up outside, rattling the loose gutter Jack had been meaning to fix. His phone buzzed again, another text from the bank about the upcoming mortgage payment. "Third warning this week." He silenced it without reading the message. "Found something interesting about our customer," Maria said, pulling up a local news article on her tablet. "Rachel Martinez, she's the nurse they hired for the new pediatric night shift at Valley General, the one they've been trying to staff for months." She paused, scrolling down. "Single mother, relocated from Cedar Mills after their hospital shut down, was living in her car with the girls while looking for work." Jack's hand stilled on the wrench he was holding. Cedar Mills, another small town hollowed out when its main employer left. He'd seen the same story play out too many times. Factories closing, families struggling, communities crumbling. His own town was heading down that same path. The garage's landline rang, its harsh buzz echoing off the metal walls. The caller ID showed Valley Bank. Jack let it ring through to voicemail, just like he had all week. The answering machine clicked on, his father's voice still greeting callers. They'd never gotten around to changing it after he passed. "Remember what Dad used to say?" Jack asked, turning back to the engine. "In times of trouble, fix what's in front of you. The rest will follow." He adjusted his work light, revealing more corrosion around the transmission housing. "Right now, this van's what's in front of me. These girls need their mother to keep her job." Maria watched him work, concern etched on her face. She'd been updating the garage's books all evening, and the numbers kept getting worse. 3 regular customers had already switched to the discount chain across town. The part supplier was threatening to cut off their credit line, and Tommy's latest physical therapy bills. "Jack," she said quietly, "I found some overtime money in the budget. Take it. Use it for Tommy's therapy." He shook his head, not looking up. You earned that. Your family needs it too. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And what about your family? Maria pressed. Tommy's making progress, but if he misses sessions... She trailed off as Jack's shoulders tensed. The garage fell silent, except for the steady drum of rain now falling outside. Through the open office door, they could see the wall of family photos. 3 generations of Reynolds men standing proud in front of the garage. Jack's father teaching him his first oil change, Tommy's high school graduation. The newest photo showed Tommy in physical therapy, learning to walk again after the accident that had nearly taken him. Jack set down his tools, running a hand through his graying hair. The coffee had gone cold, untouched. I made a promise, he said finally. In that hospital waiting room, not knowing if Tommy would. He swallowed hard. I promised that if we got through it, I'd help others the way that anonymous donor helped us. Rachel and those girls, they're fighting the same battle we did. Different circumstances, same war. Maria nodded slowly, understanding the weight of promises made in hospital waiting rooms. She gathered her things, knowing Jack would work through the night. As she reached the door, she turned back. Your father would be proud, she said softly. But he'd also tell you that you can't help others if you're drowning yourself, Jack finished. I know, but sometimes faith is all we've got left. After Maria left, Jack stood alone in his garage, surrounded by the ghosts of better days. The rain fell harder outside, matching the rhythm of his thoughts. Tomorrow the bank would call again, bills would come due, the world would demand its pound of flesh. But tonight, he could fix what was in front of him. Tonight, he could keep one family from falling through the cracks. What Jack didn't know was that his act of kindness had already set larger wheels in motion. Sometimes, the universe has a way of balancing its books, and help can come from the most unexpected places. The first rays of morning sunlight had barely touched the garage's weathered sign when Rachel's borrowed truck pulled into the lot. She emerged looking exhausted after her night shift, still in her hospital scrubs, but her eyes widened when she saw her minivan parked near the garage entrance, looking cleaner than she'd left it. Jack stepped out of the office, wiping his hands on a shop rag. He'd managed a few hours of sleep on the old break room couch, his father's leather jacket serving as a makeshift pillow. Good morning, he called out, trying to hide his own fatigue. Want to see what we found? Rachel approached cautiously, her hospital badge still hanging around her neck. Her daughters weren't with her, probably dropped off at school in Jack's truck. I was up all night worried, she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. About the van. About how I'd ever repay you, about... Let's start with the good news, Jack interrupted gently, popping the hood. Transmissions fixed. Replaced the brake lines, coolant systems overhauled, and threw in an oil change. Should run better than it has in years. Rachel's hand trembled as she touched the clean engine compartment. Mr. Reynolds, I can't. I mean, I'll pay you back somehow, but it might take months, maybe years. Jack, he corrected, closing the hood. And about payment. He hesitated, an idea forming. One that Maria would probably call crazy, but felt right in his gut. How about we work something out? Something different? Inside the office, Maria was already at her desk, eyebrows rising as she overheard Jack's proposition. Rachel sat in the worn client chair, clutching her coffee while Jack explained his thought. Valley General's just 3 blocks from here, he said, leaning against his desk. You said you're working night shifts. A lot of our customers, elderly folks, single parents, people working long hours, they have trouble dropping off their cars during regular business hours. What if we started offering night drop-off service? You could be our point of contact at the hospital, let people know they have options. Rachel's tired eyes sparked with understanding. Like a partnership? I could help coordinate with hospital staff too. So many nurses and doctors struggle with car maintenance because of their schedules. Exactly, Jack nodded. Instead of traditional payment, you help us build that bridge. Maybe put up some flyers in the break room. Spread the word. We'll work out a long-term arrangement for the repairs. Maria watched the exchange silently, her expression softening. This was classic Jack, finding ways to help others while potentially helping himself, though she suspected the latter wasn't his primary motivation. As Rachel and Jack worked out the details, the office door chimed. A tall man in an expensive suit entered, looking somewhat out of place in the modest garage. His polished shoes contrasted sharply with the oil-stained floor. "Mr. Reynolds?" the man asked, his voice carrying a hint of authority. "I'm Richard Morton from Valley Bank's main branch. We've been trying to reach you about your loan situation." His eyes swept the office, taking in the dated equipment, the family photos, the stack of unpaid bills partially hidden under a parts catalog. Jack's face tightened almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Morton, I was going to call today. If we could discuss this in private." Rachel stood quickly, recognizing her cue to leave. "I'll get the flyers designed tonight," she said, gathering her things. "And Jack, thank you for everything." She slipped past the banker, keys clutched tightly in her hand. Morton watched her go, then turned back to Jack. "That's the minivan from last night? The one that needed extensive repairs?" His tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Mr. Reynolds, our records show you ordered parts for that vehicle using your emergency business line of credit. Credit that was supposed to be reserved for stabilizing your business." "Those repairs were necessary," Jack said firmly, standing straighter despite his exhaustion. "Just like the Johnson family's radiator last month, and the Williams brake job before that." Morton opened his leather portfolio. "Mr. Reynolds, your father built this garage on solid business principles. But these constant charitable cases, we've been patient because of your history with the bank, but—" Maria cleared her throat pointedly, drawing both men's attention. Through the office window, they could see Rachel driving away in her restored minivan, a fresh Reynolds Auto Service business card tucked into her visor. What none of them noticed was the sleek black Tesla parked across the street, its tinted windows concealing its occupant. Inside, someone was watching the scene unfold with great interest, making notes on a sophisticated tablet computer while speaking quietly into a phone. "Yes," the figure in the Tesla said softly. "I think we've found exactly what we were looking for. Run a full background check on Jack Reynolds and his garage. I want to know everything, especially about his son's medical history and that anonymous donor from 3 years ago." As Mr. Morton left the garage, his stern warnings about fiscal responsibility and final notices still hanging in the air, Jack slumped into his office chair. The leather was cracked and worn, just like everything else in the shop. Maria stood in the doorway, her usual composed expression slipping into worry. "They're giving us 2 weeks," Jack said quietly, staring at the formal letter Morton had left. 2 weeks to bring the accounts current, or they'll start foreclosure proceedings. His eyes drifted to the wall of photos, lingering on the image of his father cutting the ribbon at the garage's opening 40 years ago. Maria pulled up a chair, her accounting notebook in hand. "I've been running the numbers all morning. If we take Peterson's fleet account offer, cut back on supplies, maybe reduce hours." She trailed off, seeing Jack's expression. They both knew it wouldn't be enough. The morning sun climbed higher, sending shafts of light through the dusty windows. Outside, the familiar sounds of the neighborhood drifted in. Mrs. Chen opening her small grocery store next door, the elementary school bus rumbling past, life going on despite the weight of impending decisions. "Tommy's physical therapy appointment is in an hour," Maria reminded gently. "You should go. I'll handle things here." Jack nodded, grabbing his keys. As he stepped out of the office, he heard the distinct rumble of a failing alternator. A beat-up Chevrolet pulled into the lot, smoke wisping from under its hood. The driver, an elderly man in a veteran's cap, emerged looking worried. "Please tell me you can help," the man said, his weathered face creased with concern. "My daughter's getting married this weekend in Cedar Grove. I've been saving for months to make the trip." Jack glanced at his watch, then at Maria through the office window. She was already shaking her head. They both knew they couldn't afford to take on another charity case. Not now. Not with Morton's deadline looming. "Let me take a quick look," Jack heard himself say, even as his logical mind screamed about the bank's warnings. The alternator was shot, just as he'd suspected. The battery was on its last legs too, and several belts needed replacing. Parts alone would cost more than they could spare. The old veteran, James Walker, according to his ID, stood anxiously nearby, clutching a worn photo of a young woman in a graduation gown. "My little girl," he explained, seeing Jack's interest. "First in our family to finish college, working 2 jobs to pay for this wedding. I promised I'd be there to walk her down the aisle." Jack closed the hood, his decision already made despite every practical consideration. "We'll get you there, Mr. Walker. Give me 4 hours." Maria appeared with the paperwork, her expression a mixture of resignation and understanding. As she led Mr. Walker to the office, Jack called his son. "Hey, Tommy," he said, watching Maria comfort the worried veteran. "Going to be a little late to therapy today. Something came up at the shop." He paused, listening to his son's response. "Yeah, I know. I'll make it up to you. Promise." The next few hours passed in a blur of focused work. Jack had to call in favors from 3 different parts suppliers, promising future business he wasn't sure he could deliver. Each swipe of the emergency credit card felt like another nail in the garage's coffin, but the image of Mr. Walker missing his daughter's wedding haunted him more than any bank warning. By early afternoon, the Chevrolet purred like new. Mr. Walker's eyes welled up when Jack handed him the keys, explaining the repairs and maintenance he'd done. "How much do I owe you?" the veteran asked, reaching for his worn wallet. Jack quoted a price that barely covered the parts cost. Even that was more than he should have charged, seeing the way Mr. Walker's hands shook as he counted out carefully saved bills. "My father served too," Jack explained, helping the older man into his car. "He taught me that some things matter more than money. Have a wonderful time at the wedding." As the Chevrolet disappeared down the street, Maria stepped out of the office. "That's the last of our parts credit," she said softly, "and Tommy's physical therapist called. They can't hold his appointment time if we miss another session." Jack nodded, the weight of his choices settling heavy on his shoulders. Through the garage windows, he could see Mrs. Chen arranging her grocery display next door. She caught his eye and waved. She'd been one of his father's first customers back when the neighborhood was different, when small businesses could still thrive here. What Jack didn't know was that at that exact moment, in a sleek office 40 miles away, a very different conversation was taking place. The figure from the Tesla sat behind a massive desk, reviewing files spread across multiple screens. "The anonymous donation to Tommy Reynolds' medical fund," a voice said through the speakerphone. "We traced it. You're not going to believe where it came from." The figure smiled, making a final note. "Actually, I think I will. Schedule the meeting. It's time we paid Jack Reynolds a visit." In the gathering dusk of his garage, Jack finally let himself feel the full impact of the day's decisions. The bank's deadline, Tommy's missed therapy, the dwindling resources, everything was coming to a head. But as he looked at the thank you note Mr. Walker had left, complete with a wedding invitation, he couldn't bring himself to regret his choices. Sometimes, he thought, the most expensive decisions are the ones our hearts make for us. The next morning dawned gray and cool, a light drizzle tapping against the garage's metal roof. Jack arrived earlier than usual, the weight of yesterday's decisions and Morton's deadline pushing him to squeeze every possible hour out of the day. As he unlocked the front door, he noticed Rachel's minivan already in the parking lot, with Rachel herself waiting under the building's worn awning. "Everything okay with the van?" Jack asked, concern creeping into his voice. She wasn't supposed to be off her night shift for another hour. Rachel shook her head, a small smile playing at her lips. "The van's perfect. Actually, I'm here because of something else. Remember how you suggested I spread the word at the hospital?" She pulled out a stack of papers from her bag. "Well, it's already working. 3 nurses asked about your night drop-off service, and Dr. Anderson, he's the head of emergency medicine. He wants to talk about setting up a regular maintenance program for the hospital staff." Jack unlocked the office, flipping on the lights as Rachel followed him in. The morning's first pot of coffee started brewing, filling the space with its familiar aroma. "That's unexpected," he managed, scanning the inquiries Rachel had brought. The potential business could be significant, but with their current resources. "There's more," Rachel continued, her excitement building. I was telling one of my patients about how you helped me. Sweet old man. Been in the hospital for a week. Turns out he owns half the taxi companies in the region. He's interested in moving his fleet maintenance contract to your garage. The coffee maker sputtered its last drops as Jack absorbed this information. A fleet contract could be the lifeline they needed, but the bank's 2-week deadline loomed large. They'd need capital for parts, maybe another mechanic. The bell above the door chimed as Maria arrived, shaking rain from her umbrella. Her eyes widened at the sight of Rachel's enthusiasm and Jack's stunned expression. What did I miss? Before anyone could answer, another vehicle pulled into the lot, the unmistakable sound of Mr. Walker's Chevrolet. The elderly veteran emerged, but he wasn't alone. A well-dressed younger man accompanied him, helping him navigate the wet pavement. "Jack!" Mr. Walker called out, beaming. "Had to come by before heading to the wedding. This is my son-in-law-to-be, Marcus. He's some kind of investment banker in the city." The pride in his voice was unmistakable. Marcus stepped forward, extending his hand. His grip was firm, professional. "Mr. Reynolds, I've been hearing about you all morning. First from James here, then from my colleague who handles Valley General's corporate accounts. Seems like your name keeps coming up." Jack returned the handshake, noting the expensive watch, the quality suit. Something about Marcus's presence felt significant, like pieces of a puzzle slowly shifting into place. "The thing is," Marcus continued, "I specialize in community development projects, small business revitalization specifically. James told me about what you did for him, and I've been hearing similar stories all morning. The single mom you helped recently, her supervisor at the hospital is my sister." Rachel gasped softly from her position near the coffee maker. The connections were falling into place like dominoes. The world works in mysterious ways, doesn't it? Marcus smiled, pulling out a business card. "I'd love to discuss some possibilities. My firm has been looking to invest in businesses that still understand the importance of community." The morning light had strengthened, breaking through the clouds and streaming through the office windows. It illuminated the wall of family photos, highlighting 3 generations of Reynolds men standing proud in front of their garage. Jack's father's words seemed to echo in his mind. "In times of trouble, fix what's in front of you. The rest will follow." Maria watched the scene unfold, her accountant's mind already racing with possibilities. But something caught her attention through the window. That same black Tesla from yesterday parked across the street. This time, its driver's door was opening. "Actually," Marcus said, following Maria's gaze, "there's someone else who'd like to join our discussion, someone who's been watching your garage with great interest." The Tesla's door closed, revealing a figure that made both Rachel and Maria freeze in recognition. Even Jack felt the air change in the room as the person approached the garage. "Is that?" Rachel whispered, but her question was answered by the confident stride of one of the most recognizable tech billionaires in the country. What had started as a simple act of kindness was about to transform into something none of them could have imagined. The universe, it seemed, had been paying attention to the quiet mechanic who couldn't stop helping others, even when it cost him everything. The tech billionaire who entered Reynolds' auto service wasn't what Jack had expected. Alexander Chen, founder of Future Drive Technologies and one of the most influential figures in autonomous vehicle development, wore a simple black sweater and jeans. His presence, however, filled the modest office with an almost electric energy. "Jack Reynolds," Chen said warmly, extending his hand. "We finally meet. Though in a way, we've met before." His eyes drifted to the wall of photos, settling on the picture of Tommy in physical therapy. Jack's mind raced, pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known he was solving starting to click into place. The anonymous donor from 3 years ago, the one who had helped with Tommy's final hospital bills. "Please, let's all sit," Chen gestured, as if this were his office instead of a humble garage. Marcus quickly pulled up chairs while Rachel and Maria exchanged stunned glances. Mr. Walker stood quietly by the door, seeming both surprised and somehow unsurprised by this turn of events. 3 years ago, Chen began, once everyone was seated, "I started a project. Not the kind that makes headlines or attracts investors. I wanted to find people who embodied the spirit of genuine community service. People who help others even when it costs them everything. He paused, his gaze steady on Jack. My team tracks acts of kindness, particularly in struggling communities. We found you when you helped that family with their medical transport van last year, the one they needed for their daughter's chemotherapy. Jack remembered. The Hendersons. He'd worked through 2 weekends to get their van running, knowing they couldn't afford the repairs but couldn't afford to miss the treatments either. What caught my attention, Chen continued, wasn't just the act itself, but the pattern. Every time you got a little ahead, every time you had a chance to stabilize your business, you'd help someone else instead. The single mother who needed to get to her new job, the teacher with the broken-down school bus, the elderly couple who couldn't afford their car payment. Maria shifted in her chair, her accounting ledger clutched tightly in her hands. Each case Chen mentioned represented red ink in their books, decisions that had kept her awake at night worrying about the garage's future. Then I discovered something fascinating. Chen leaned forward slightly. You did all this while dealing with your own crisis, your son's accident, the medical bills, the rehabilitation costs. That's when I made the anonymous donation. I wanted to see what you'd do. What I'd do? Jack asked, his voice rougher than usual. Chen smiled. Whether you'd use that breathing room to secure your own position or, he gestured to Rachel and Mr. Walker, continue helping others. You exceeded every expectation. But now you're in trouble with the bank, aren't you? The morning sun had fully broken through the clouds now, streaming through the windows and reflecting off the polished surface of Chen's Tesla outside. The contrast between the luxury vehicle and the weathered garage seemed to emphasize the surreal nature of this meeting. Mr. Chen, Marcus interjected smoothly, my firm has been developing a community business revitalization program. When we discovered our interests aligned regarding Reynolds' auto service. Indeed, Chen nodded. Mr. Reynolds, I'm not here to simply bail out your garage. I'm here to propose a partnership. My company is developing a network of community-based service centers for the next generation of vehicles. We need locations, yes, but more importantly, we need people who understand that technology without humanity is meaningless. He reached into his jacket, producing a tablet. I'm prepared to clear your debt with Valley Bank, fund a complete modernization of your facility, and establish a training program for local youth interested in automotive technology. In return, your garage becomes part of our pilot program, while maintaining its independence and your approach to community service. Rachel gasped softly. Maria's ledger slipped from her fingers. Mr. Walker smiled knowingly, as if he'd somehow expected this all along. There's more, Chen continued, his eyes moving to the physical therapy photo. The program includes a medical transport assistance fund, ensuring that anyone in this community who needs vehicle repairs for medical transportation gets them, regardless of ability to pay. We'll name it after Tommy. Jack stared at the photo of his son, remembering those dark days in the hospital, the anonymous donation that had given them hope, the promise he'd made to pay it forward. Everything had led to this moment, every decision to help others despite the cost. Why? He finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why me? Why this garage? Chen stood walking to the window. Outside, the morning traffic moved past, each vehicle representing a story, a need, a person trying to keep their world moving forward. Because, Mr. Reynolds, in an age of autonomous vehicles and artificial intelligence, we need to remember that the most important connections are still human ones. Your garage doesn't just fix cars, it helps people. That's what we want to preserve and expand. The room fell silent as Jack absorbed the magnitude of what was being offered, a chance to continue his father's legacy while securing the garage's future, a way to help others without sacrificing everything, a bridge between the old ways and the new. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the garage floor as Jack sat alone in his office, Chen's proposal document open on his desk. The others had left hours ago, Chen to his next appointment, Marcus to prepare the paperwork, Rachel to her next shift at the hospital. Only Maria remained, quietly updating their books in the corner, giving Jack space to process the morning's events. Through the window, he could see Mrs. Chen from the grocery store sweeping her sidewalk, just as she had every afternoon for 30 years. She'd been there the day Jack's father first opened the garage, bringing good luck candies and wisdom from the old country. A business is like a tree, she'd said then. It needs strong roots in the community to survive the storms. Jack picked up his phone, scrolling to Tommy's number. His son needed to hear about this first before anyone else. As if reading his thoughts, Maria spoke up from her corner. He's still in physical therapy for another hour. They took him early today since you missed yesterday. The therapy center was across town, in a modern building that always made Jack feel out of place. He glanced at the clock, then at the stack of work orders on his desk. 3 more cars needed attention today, including a single father's pickup truck that was his only way to get to his construction job. Go, Maria said firmly, reading his hesitation. I'll call Peter from the trade school. He's been begging for apprentice hours. He can help with the basic repairs until you get back. The drive to the therapy center gave Jack time to think, to remember. Each street corner held memories. The spot where he'd taught Tommy to ride a bike, the park where they'd practiced baseball before the accident, the intersection where everything had changed 3 years ago. The rehab facility's automatic doors whooshed open as Jack entered, the sterile hospital smell bringing back a flood of memories. He found Tommy in the physical therapy room, working with his therapist on a new walking exercise. His son's determination was visible in every movement, every careful step. Dad? Tommy paused, surprised to see him. Everything okay at the shop? Jack watched his son's face as he explained the morning's events, Chen's appearance, the revelation about the anonymous donation, the proposed partnership. Tommy's eyes widened at the mention of the medical transport fund being named after him. So that's why you helped all those people, Tommy said quietly. After the anonymous donation, you were paying it forward. Your grandfather taught me that a garage isn't just about fixing cars, Jack replied, helping Tommy to a nearby chair. It's about keeping people's lives moving forward. When we almost lost you, when that donation came through, I promised myself I'd never turn away someone in real need. Tommy nodded, understanding in his eyes. Like Mr. Henderson and his daughter's chemotherapy van, or Mrs. Rodriguez and her delivery truck when she was starting her catering business. You remember them? I remember all of them, Dad. They still stop by the therapy center sometimes asking about me, telling me how you helped them. Tommy adjusted his leg brace, a thoughtful expression on his face. That's why Chen chose our garage, isn't it? Because you never stopped helping people, even when it was killing the business. Through the therapy room window, they could see the parking lot where various medical transport vehicles were parked. Each one represented a story, a family fighting their own battles, trying to keep hope alive. The thing is, Tommy, Jack said slowly, Chen's offer would change everything. Modernize the garage, clear our debts, set up that medical transport fund. But it would also mean becoming part of something bigger, moving away from being just a small family garage. Tommy was quiet for a moment, watching a young girl being helped into a specially equipped van outside. Remember what Grandpa used to say about change? The only constant in life is the need to help others. Everything else is just details. Jack smiled, hearing his father's wisdom in his son's voice. The old man had built the garage from nothing, turned it into a cornerstone of the community. Now, through Chen's offer, it had the chance to help even more people. His phone buzzed, a text from Maria. Peter, the trade school student, had arrived and was helping with the waiting repairs. She'd also heard from Rachel at the hospital. 3 more staff members had signed up for the night drop-off service. You should do it, Dad, Tommy said firmly. Chen's not trying to change what the garage is. He's giving us the tools to do more of what we already do, to help more people. Jack looked at his son, seeing not just the young man he was now, but the little boy who used to play with toy cars on the garage floor, the teenager who'd learned to change oil at his side, the fighter who'd never given up through months of rehabilitation. When did you get so wise? Jack asked, emotion thick in his voice. Tommy grinned, that familiar spark in his eyes that the accident hadn't dimmed. Must be all those life lessons you taught me while fixing cars. He paused, then added softly, Grandpa would be proud, Dad, of everything you've done, everything you're going to do. Outside, the afternoon was fading into evening. Soon, Rachel would start her night shift at the hospital. Marcus would be finishing the partnership paperwork. Chen would be planning the next phase of his community service center network. And Jack was beginning to see the future of Reynolds' auto service taking shape, built on the foundation his father had laid, but reaching towards something new. The next morning, the garage hummed with an energy it hadn't known in years. Word of Chen's visit had spread through the small town's grapevine, and curious onlookers kept finding excuses to drive past, trying to catch a glimpse of any changes. Inside, Jack and Maria sat with Marcus, poring over the detailed proposal documents. "The initial investment will cover complete modernization of your equipment," Marcus explained, spreading architectural renderings across Jack's desk. "New lifts, diagnostic systems, specialized tools for hybrid and electric vehicles. But we're keeping the original building." Mr. Chen was very specific about maintaining the garage's historic character. Maria's calculator clicked steadily as she worked through the financial projections. For the first time in years, the numbers were starting to make sense. "And the community service program?" she asked, looking up from her calculations. Marcus nodded, pulling out another document. "That's actually the cornerstone of the whole project. 25% of the garage's capacity will be reserved for subsidized repairs, people who need vehicle maintenance for medical transport, job access, or other essential needs. The Tommy Reynolds Medical Transport Fund will cover the costs." Jack studied the blueprints, noting how the expansion preserved his father's original design while adding modern amenities. The old storage room would become a training center for local youth interested in automotive technology. The parking lot would be expanded to accommodate more vehicles, with charging stations for electric cars. "There's something else," Marcus added, his tone shifting slightly. "Mr. Chen asked me to give you this." He handed Jack a sealed envelope. Inside was a newspaper clipping from 20 years ago. A small article about a local mechanic who'd helped a struggling single mother keep her car running so she could get her sick daughter to treatments. Jack recognized Joe Martinez, the mechanic who'd helped his own family during Lisa's illness. "Chen found him," Marcus said quietly. "Joe's retired now, living in Florida. But when Chen told him about your garage, about how you'd carried on his tradition of helping others, he wants to come back, help set up the training program. Says he has one more generation of mechanics to teach." The office door chimed as Rachel entered, still in her hospital scrubs. Behind her came Dr. Anderson, the head of emergency medicine, and several other hospital staff members. They carried stacks of papers, vehicle information forms, maintenance requests, shift schedules. "Hope we're not interrupting," Rachel said, though her smile suggested she knew exactly what she was doing. "But we've got 37 staff members who want to sign up for the night service program, and Dr. Anderson has a proposal about coordinating medical transport maintenance with patient appointment schedules." Dr. Anderson stepped forward, extending his hand to Jack. "What you're doing here, it's more than just car repair. You're helping us provide better patient care. When people know they have reliable transportation to their appointments, their health outcomes improve significantly." As the hospital staff spread their paperwork across the counter, Peter, the trade school student, poked his head in from the garage. "Mr. Reynolds, that delivery van you were worried about? Found the problem. It's the timing belt, just like you thought. Owner's a meal service volunteer, delivers food to homebound seniors." Jack watched as his small office filled with people, each representing a different thread in the community's fabric. Marcus with his investment plans, Rachel and the hospital staff with their transportation needs, Peter representing the next generation of mechanics eager to learn. Through the window, he could see Mrs. Chen hanging a "Congratulations Reynolds Auto" banner across her grocery store window. Other neighboring businesses were following suit, the whole street coming alive with a renewed sense of purpose. His phone buzzed, a message from Tommy. "Physical therapist says I can start helping at the shop next week. Light duty only. But I want to be part of this, Dad." Maria appeared at his elbow, her eyes suspiciously bright. "Jack, look." She pointed to the growing crowd outside. Mr. Walker had returned from his daughter's wedding, still in his suit, leading a group of elderly veterans. Each one had a story about how Reynolds Auto Service had helped them over the years. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, Marcus said, watching the scene unfold. Chen's vision isn't just about modernizing one garage. It's about creating a model that can be replicated in other communities. You're going to be the prototype, Jack. Show the world that success and service can go hand in hand. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Jack's father's voice seemed to echo in the familiar space. In times of trouble, fix what's in front of you. The rest will follow. Looking at the gathered crowd, the plan spread across his desk. The hope in everyone's eyes, Jack realized that's exactly what he'd done. One repair at a time, one person at a time, he'd fixed what was in front of him. And now, somehow, the rest was following. The universe had noticed his quiet acts of kindness, and through Chen's intervention, was giving him the means to do even more. The garage would evolve, grow, change with the times, but its heart, its commitment to helping others, would remain as solid as the foundation his father had poured 40 years ago. The transformation of Reynolds's auto service began the very next week. Chen's team moved with remarkable efficiency, setting up temporary work areas in the parking lot so the garage could continue operating during renovations. Jack watched as modern diagnostic equipment was installed alongside his father's old tools, bridging the gap between tradition and innovation. It's like watching past and future shake hands, Maria commented, organizing the new digital filing system while keeping their old paper ledgers close by. The morning sun streamed through newly cleaned windows, highlighting the controlled chaos of renovation. Tommy had started his promised light duty, manning the front desk and learning the new scheduling software. His presence seemed to energize the entire shop, especially when former customers recognized him. "You're the reason your dad helped me," more than one person told him, sharing stories of times when Jack had gone above and beyond. Joe Martinez arrived from Florida that morning, his weathered face breaking into a broad smile as he surveyed the changes. "Still smells the same," he said, running his hand along the old workbench, "like honest work and second chances." He'd brought his own set of tools, planning to stay for 6 months to help train the next generation of community-minded mechanics. "Your father would have loved this," Joe told Jack, as they watched Peter and 2 other trade school students learning to use the new hybrid vehicle diagnostic system. "He always said a garage should grow with its community. Speaking of which," he nodded toward the door where Rachel was leading a group of hospital administrators on a tour. The hospital had become their biggest supporter, helping to coordinate the medical transport program. Dr. Anderson had gone further, working with his board to establish a partnership that would ensure patients always had reliable transportation to their appointments. "Look at this data," Rachel said, showing the administrators a chart on her tablet. "Since we started the night service program, appointment attendance has improved by 30%. People aren't missing their treatments because of car troubles anymore." Jack watched from his office as Joe gathered the trade school students around an engine, teaching them the same diagnostic techniques he'd taught Jack 20 years ago. "Listen to what the engine tells you," he advised. "Every sound, every vibration has a story." The door chimed as Mr. Walker entered, leading another group of veterans. They'd formed a volunteer corps, helping to coordinate transportation for disabled vets and their families. The sight of them in their caps and jackets, proudly showing visitors around their garage, never failed to warm Jack's heart. "You've started something remarkable here," Chen's voice came from behind him. The tech billionaire had returned for a progress check, though Jack suspected he just enjoyed seeing his vision come to life. "But I'm curious, how are you handling the personal aspect? All these changes, all these new responsibilities?" Jack gestured to the organized chaos around them. Tommy was helping an elderly woman understand the new online booking system. Maria was training a young woman from the community college in automotive business management. Peter and his fellow students were absorbing Joe's decades of wisdom. "We're growing," Jack replied, "but we're growing like a family. Everyone who comes through that door becomes part of something bigger than just car repair. They become part of our story." Chen nodded thoughtfully, watching as Rachel coordinated with the hospital staff. "That's exactly what I hoped would happen. Technology can make things more efficient, but it's the human connections that make them meaningful." A commotion at the front drew their attention. A young mother had rushed in, panic clear on her face. Her car had broken down with 2 kids in car seats, and she was already late for her youngest's doctor's appointment. Without hesitation, the entire garage sprang into action. Joe and his students diagnosed the problem, Mr. Walker's veterans helped with the children, and Rachel coordinated with the hospital to reschedule the appointment. "See that?" Jack said to Chen. "A month ago she would have been stranded. Now she has an entire community supporting her." The day continued in a blur of activity. More hospital staff signed up for the night service program. Trade school students absorbed Joe's lessons. Tommy coordinated with Marcus about expanding the medical transport fund to neighboring communities. Through it all, Jack felt his father's presence, saw his principles living on in every interaction. As evening approached, Mrs. Chen brought over dinner for everyone, just as she had done for Jack's father years ago. The garage family, old and new members alike, gathered in the newly renovated break room, sharing stories and plans for the future. "You know what this reminds me of?" Joe asked, looking around at the diverse group. "Your father's first day in business. The whole neighborhood came together, everyone wanting to be part of something special. History's repeating itself, Jack, but this time it's reaching even further." Outside, the sun was setting on another day of transformation. The old garage sign now shared space with Chen's Future Drive Technologies logo, a visual representation of tradition meeting innovation. But more importantly, it represented hope. Hope for a community that took care of its own. Hope for a future where kindness and success could coexist. Tommy, watching his father take it all in, smiled knowingly. "Still fixing what's in front of you, Dad," he said softly. "Just with a bigger toolbox now." 3 months into the transformation, Reynolds Auto Service had become something no one could have predicted. The renovation was complete, but the real changes went far deeper than the fresh paint and new equipment. What had once been a struggling family garage had evolved into a community hub, a place where technology and compassion worked hand in hand. Early morning found Jack in his office, reviewing the previous night's service logs. The night shift, a concept that would have seemed impossible just months ago, had served 3 emergency cases: a nurse's car breaking down after her shift, a late-night medical transport requiring urgent repair, and a stranded family passing through town. "Coffee?" Maria appeared at his door carrying 2 steaming cups. "You're here early." She'd adapted to the garage's evolution with remarkable grace, managing both the traditional bookkeeping and the new digital systems Chen's team had installed. "Couldn't sleep," Jack admitted, accepting the coffee. "Keep thinking about today's ceremony." The official ribbon cutting for the Tommy Reynolds Medical Transport Center was scheduled for noon. Local media would be there, along with Chen and various community leaders. Tommy himself was already at his desk in the new dispatch center, coordinating with the hospital's transport division. His physical therapy had progressed to the point where he could work part-time, and he'd found his calling managing the program named in his honor. "Dad, you need to see this," Tommy called out, waving a tablet. The screen showed a map of their service area, dotted with pins representing completed assistance calls. "We've helped over 200 families with medical transport in just 3 months. Dr. Anderson says patient compliance with treatment schedules is up 60%. The morning sun illuminated the newly expanded garage bay, where Joe Martinez was already working with his latest class of students. The training program had exceeded all expectations, with young people from 3 counties applying to learn not just automotive skills, but the principles of community service that defined Reynolds Auto Service. "Remember what I taught your father," Joe told his students as they gathered around a hybrid engine. "Every vehicle that comes through those doors represents someone's lifeline, to their job, their family, their medical care. We're not just fixing cars, we're keeping dreams alive." Rachel burst through the door, still in her hospital scrubs from the night shift. "You won't believe this," she announced, excitement clear in her voice. "The state health department saw our program results. They want to use us as a model for other communities. They're talking about grants, expansion possibilities." Before Jack could respond, Mr. Walker and his veterans group arrived for their regular morning meeting. They'd become an integral part of the operation, using their organizational skills to coordinate volunteer drivers and emergency response teams. Got 3 more garages interested in our veteran support program, Mr. Walker reported proudly. They've seen what we're doing here, how it changes lives. They want to learn. The morning proceeded in its new normal rhythm, a carefully choreographed dance of traditional auto repair, emergency response, training sessions, and community outreach. Mrs. Chen arrived with her usual delivery of breakfast pastries, now serving a much larger garage family. Marcus appeared mid-morning, bringing final details for the ceremony. Chen's investment group has approved Phase 2, he announced. 3 more locations in neighboring counties, all based on your model, Jack. They'll need your guidance to maintain the right balance of business and community service. Jack stood at his office window, watching the activity below. Peter and his fellow students were practicing diagnostics on an electric vehicle. Tommy was showing a group of hospital administrators the new dispatch system. Rachel was coordinating with the overnight crew, ensuring smooth shift transitions. Your father built this place on trust and service, Joe said, joining him at the window. Chen's investment didn't change that. It amplified it, gave it the wings it needed to soar. Outside, a crowd was beginning to gather for the ceremony. Local business owners, hospital staff, grateful families, all those whose lives had been touched by Reynolds Auto Service over the years. They carried signs and banners, some reading "Thank you, Reynolds," and others proclaiming "Community heroes work here." You know what really gets me? Jack said softly. Every person out there has a story. Every car we've fixed, every family we've helped. They're all connected now. We're not just keeping vehicles running, we're keeping hope alive. Maria appeared with the ceremony schedule. Chen's helicopter could be heard approaching in the distance. The media vans were setting up their equipment. But what caught Jack's eye was Tommy, wheeling himself to the front of the gathering crowd, ready to share his story and inspire others. From one act of kindness, Maria mused, watching the scene unfold. All of this from one decision to help a stranded single mom. Jack thought back to that morning when Rachel's minivan had limped into his lot. He'd been drowning in debt, facing foreclosure, barely keeping his head above water. Yet something, his father's teachings, his own experiences with Tommy's accident, the memory of Joe's kindness during Lisa's illness, had compelled him to help. Sometimes, he replied, straightening his tie for the ceremony, the biggest journeys start with the smallest steps. We just have to be brave enough to take them. The crowd outside had swollen to fill the entire street. Chen's helicopter landed in the cleared parking lot. A new chapter was about to begin, not just for Reynolds Auto Service, but for every community that would follow their model. Proof that in a world of advancing technology and changing times, the simple act of helping others never goes out of style. The ribbon-cutting ceremony transformed into something far more significant than anyone had anticipated. What was planned as a simple dedication evolved into a spontaneous community celebration, with people sharing stories of how Reynolds' auto service had touched their lives over 3 generations. Chen stood at the makeshift podium, his usual corporate polish softened by genuine emotion. What we're celebrating today isn't just a modernized garage or a medical transport program, he began. We're celebrating the proof that compassion and commerce can coexist, that success doesn't have to come at the expense of service. The crowd had spilled onto the surrounding streets, forcing the police to redirect traffic. Former customers stood alongside current ones, each holding stories of times when the garage had been more than just a repair shop. Mrs. Chen had closed her grocery store for the day, setting up tables of food for the impromptu festival the ceremony had become. Tommy wheeled himself to the podium after Chen, his presence drawing a hushed attention from the crowd. 3 years ago, I thought my accident had destroyed everything, he began, his voice strong and clear. Our savings, our future, our hope. But what I didn't understand then was that hope doesn't die. It just takes new forms. Jack watched from the side as his son shared their story. The anonymous donation that had saved them, the promise to pay it forward, the countless acts of kindness that had led to this moment. In the crowd, he could see the faces of those they'd helped. The Henderson family, whose daughter's chemotherapy transport van still ran smoothly. Mrs. Rodriguez, whose catering business had flourished after they'd repaired her delivery truck. Countless others whose lives had intersected with the garage at crucial moments. Rachel, still in her scrubs from the night shift, took the stage next. As a nurse, I see daily how transportation challenges affect health outcomes, she explained. What Reynolds' auto service has created here isn't just a repair shop, it's a lifeline. Every car we fix, every transport we coordinate, represents someone getting the care they need. Joe Martinez stood with his students, their matching workshop uniforms creating a sea of blue in the crowd. They represented the future. Young people learning not just how to fix cars, but how to carry forward the values that had built this community. Today's cars might be different, Joe told them quietly, as speakers shared their stories. Electric engines, hybrid systems, autonomous features. But the principles remain the same. Listen to the machine, respect the craft, and never forget that behind every repair is a human story. Marcus worked the crowd, collecting business cards and contact information from other communities interested in replicating the model. It's already spreading, he told Jack during a quiet moment. 3 more towns have committed to establishing similar programs. Chen's investment group is calling it the Reynolds Initiative, combining traditional automotive service with community support networks. The ceremony reached its emotional peak when Mr. Walker and his veterans group unveiled a surprise, a restored 1957 Chevy, exactly like the one Jack's father had used when he first opened the garage. They'd been working on it in secret, using Joe's expertise and parts donated by grateful customers. "This is for your museum section," Mr. Walker announced, his voice thick with emotion. "So future generations can see where it all started. One man, one garage, one commitment to helping others." As the crowd admired the gleaming classic car, Maria appeared at Jack's side with remarkable news. "The hospital board just voted unanimously to expand the transport program," she said excitedly. "They're allocating funds to help other communities establish similar services." Rachel's data about improved patient outcomes convinced them. Peter and his fellow students demonstrated the garage's new training facilities, showing visitors how modern diagnostic equipment worked alongside traditional tools. The blend of old and new perfectly symbolized the garage's evolution, honoring its roots while embracing the future. "Your father would be proud," Joe said, joining Jack as they watched the demonstrations. "Not just of what you've built, but of how you built it. One act of kindness at a time, one repair at a time, one life touched at a time." The celebration continued into the afternoon, taking on the atmosphere of a community reunion. People shared meals at Mrs. Chen's tables, exchanged stories, and marveled at how a simple auto repair shop had become the heart of their community's revival. Chen found Jack amid the festivities. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "when I first started tracking acts of kindness in struggling communities, I was looking for proof that compassion could scale, that it could be replicated without losing its essence. What you've created here exceeds everything I hoped to find." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the renewed garage and the gathered community, Jack realized that they'd created something his father never could have imagined but would have instantly recognized. A place where technology and tradition worked together, where business success and community service reinforced each other, where every repair contributed to a larger purpose. Tommy joined them, watching the continuing celebrations. "You know what this reminds me of?" he said, gesturing to the scene before them. "All those stories about barn raisings in the old days, when communities would come together to help one of their own. We just raised something different here. Hope, purpose, connection." The day's events had proven that Reynolds Auto Service was more than a success story. It was a blueprint for how communities could support each other in the modern age. One repair, one act of kindness, one life at a time. 1 year after Chen's visit, Reynolds' Auto Service had become a model studied by communities across the country. The small garage that once struggled to keep its doors open now anchored a network of compassion-driven businesses, proving that success and service could not only coexist, but thrive together. Jack stood in his office early one morning, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The wall of family photos had expanded, now including images of the transformation, the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Tommy's first day managing the transport program, Joe teaching his students, Rachel coordinating with the hospital staff. "Morning, Dad," Tommy called from the dispatch center, his voice carrying through the renovated space. He moved more easily now, his recovery progressing beyond everyone's expectations. The medical transport program bearing his name had helped over 1,000 families in its first year, creating a ripple effect of hope throughout the region. Maria arrived with her usual stack of reports, but today they told a different story than the desperate figures of a year ago. "The numbers for the first quarter are in," she announced, her eyes bright with satisfaction. "The training program's at full capacity, the medical transport fund is fully sustainable, and 3 more communities have completed their pilot programs based on our model." Outside, Peter and his fellow graduates from Joe's first class were opening up the garage for the day. They wore the same blue uniforms as always, but now, with a small addition, a patch reading, "Reynolds Initiative, Keeping Communities Moving Forward." Each of them had already committed to managing new locations in neighboring towns, carrying forward the principles they'd learned. Rachel burst in, energetic despite having just finished her night shift at the hospital. "You won't believe this," she exclaimed, waving a medical journal. "They've published a study about our program. The data shows a 40% improvement in patient outcomes when reliable medical transportation is available. They're calling it the Reynolds effect, when community support directly impacts healthcare success." Mr. Walker and his veterans group arrived for their morning meeting, now coordinating services across multiple locations. They'd become unofficial ambassadors for the program, sharing their experiences with other veteran organizations nationwide. The model of combining automotive service with community support had struck a particular chord with former service members looking to continue their mission of helping others. "Remember when we thought we'd lose everything?" Maria mused, looking through the old ledgers they kept as a reminder of where they'd started. "Now we're helping other garages avoid that fate while serving their communities." Joe Martinez, who had decided to permanently delay his retirement to continue training new mechanics, gathered his latest class around the restored '57 Chevy. "This car represents where we came from," he told them, his hand resting on the gleaming hood. "Your electric diagnostic tools and hybrid systems represent where we're going, but the heart of what we do, that remains constant." The morning brought its usual flow of activity: hospital transport coordination, training sessions, routine repairs, and emergency assistance. But now everything moved with practiced efficiency, each person knowing their role in the larger mission. Mrs. Chen still brought breakfast for everyone, though now she needed help carrying enough food for the expanded garage family. Chen himself had visited several times throughout the year, each time bringing news of another community inspired by their example. His investment had grown into a movement, proving that his vision of scalable compassion wasn't just possible, it was profitable. "The real success," Jack told a group of visiting business leaders, "isn't in the numbers. It's in the stories. Every person who makes it to their medical treatment, every family that keeps their transportation lifeline, every student who learns to combine technical skill with compassion, that's how we measure our worth." As the day progressed, Jack found himself in the original garage bay, where his father had first taught him to listen to engines and understand the stories they told. The space had been preserved amidst all the modernization, a reminder of their roots and principles. Tommy joined him carrying a framed article about their latest achievement, recognition from the National Community Service Association. "You know what I realized, Dad?" he said, looking around at the bustling facility. "When you helped Rachel that day, you weren't just fixing her car. You were showing everyone that one person's kindness can change the world." Outside, the sun climbed higher over Reynolds' auto service, now a beacon of hope and innovation in a changing world. The parking lot filled with vehicles bringing stories, challenges, and opportunities to make a difference. Each person who walked through their doors became part of a larger narrative, a story of how compassion, when properly supported and nurtured, could transform entire communities. "Your grandfather used to say that a garage is just a building," Jack told his son, watching their extended family at work. It's the people inside, the lives we touch, the hope we maintain. That's what makes it special. The day continued, full of purpose and possibility. In garages across the country, others were following their lead, proving that the Reynolds effect wasn't just a medical transport phenomenon. It was a testament to the enduring power of human kindness, amplified by technology and sustained by community. The simple auto repair shop had evolved into something extraordinary, a place where past and future met, where business and compassion danced in perfect harmony, and where every repair still began with the same question Jack's father had always asked: how can we help? Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.